Hey, greetings everybody, and welcome to Mahamudra for the People. Um, so we are here today. There's something bizarre in my pocket. It's called money, not a lot of it. We're here obviously as we have been in the pursuit of the practice of Mahamudra. Um, if I recall correctly, Richard had reminded me of pointing out instructions. So I'm going to offer these. I think the big thing is to just be relaxed. Um, no big deal. Um, um, and the thing about this is we're going to kind of go about this in a circuitous way. Um, our mind, as everybody who meditates probably has experienced, has this conceptual mind, has a predilection to try and figure out, things as they're happening, right? And pointing out instructions are kind of like a heat-seeking missile trying to, or a worm or a root that trying to kind of get in to these places where the conceptual mind wants to create order and stasis and this kind of conceptual knowing as a way of dropping an anchor uh, into being defined is the problem. What's interesting, I haven't had the opportunity to look more into this, although there's this book, a study, I can't even remember the guy's name. But anyway, I'll bring it to the class next week. Who studied a tremendous amount of, I believe it was ninth Karmapa's Mahamudra literature, including apparently a lot of pointing out instruction texts that he left behind. And I'm really fascinated in this as a form of literature. It's kind of like an arsenal of weapons, to help like cut through all of our intellectual delusion. So all this is to say is because these kinds of things are a little bit of a dance, I'm going to kind of do this in a couple of different ways. So this could be a little free flow. So forgive me if if it gets weird. The other thing is let's not remove these kinds of instructions from reality on the ground. And I think the thing is Mahamudra and the kind of rarefied air around it can be really disassociative from the reality of being. And what I've been kind of like struggling just to make sense of is like this new war between Israel and Hamas, and just all of these people who, just, 5 days ago were alive, and now all of these people are dead. And the sadness of it all, the oddness of it all as well, and odd in terms of foreign way of thinking of just, ending all these people's lives, creating all that suffering. It's particularly intense. So what does that have to do with pointing out instructions? Some people would say nothing, but what I would say is, it becomes our responsibility. There's a certain element of responsibility if we want to take it or want to step up. As we begin to get greater and greater clarity of our mind, then we see these things a little bit more in their raw state, and that's intense. There's a lot of suffering, right? And the whole point of this is not to break apart, but it is to be able to understand the nature of mind, even in the face of tremendous harm. On both sides, right? I'm not trying to take a particular position. I personally feel like violence like this is just um, problematic, no matter what. Um, I'm sure there are lots of children who have been killed, or parents who have been killed on both sides, and now there's nobody to take care potentially of the children of those parents and this kind of thing, and the long-term generational hatred that this kind of senseless violence creates. So um, I guess I want to bring this up just because I love Dharma, and we need to be real around being in this world system, this world system and this human realm, which requires people to show up for people and to hold space and to maybe hold space with beauty and to demonstrate love. And, hopefully this doesn't get bypassed by, where we can go with Mahamudra practice in a more kind of theoretical, disconnected way. So I want to name that. And of course, there's so many forms of suffering that humans are going through, and there's all these forms of suffering that animals are going through because we need our creature comforts, and so many forms of suffering that, for example, the technology we use made out of rare earth metals, and children being forced to work in a lot of mines for these kinds of things. And the whole point isn't to like, wallow in depression. But it's just, especially around this, uh, advice that the Dalai Lama once gave, which you can find T-shirts and posters all over India, proclaiming, never give up, right? Never give up. So what we do here can feel very disconnected to the rest of the world, but it is actually an incredibly powerful way of tapping into the sheer power of our being to be able to bring benefit to self and other. And, self means taking care of this, right? Taking care of ourselves, especially loving ourselves, you know, loving ourselves, loving the environment, taking joy and things. Well, this is all really important. Otherwise, this just becomes kind of another disconnected occurrence in a series of interrelated things around which people are suffering quite a bit, including ourselves. So I just felt the need to bring this up. So let's take a moment and really settle. Just looking down to set a timer. So really try and get relaxed. Don't worry about the future. We might not even do this. Let's say that. If you're really tense, then we'll just do something else. We could talk about basketball, women's NBA. So allow yourself to settle very comfortably and let your body rest like a mountain. Your breath be very natural and relaxed. Let your gaze be a way of connecting directly with space itself, free, easy, dynamic. In your mind, supple, radiant, expansive. all the different kinds of suffering that all beings wandering through the six realms of existence undergo are like an illusory wheel. From the moment they appear, they shine like the pure mandala of space. All of these manifestations of beings of the six realms, their suffering, their relative appearances, emanate into an ocean of pure realms. This is the great play of the variety of pure appearance, the great play of bliss emptiness. Allow yourself to rest into Mahamudra, a state of open freedom, vast ease, expansiveness. Rest into this experience of changeless, spontaneous transparency. The clarity, the emptiness, and the luminosity experienced when the mother clear light and child clear light are reunited. Allow the mind of Mahamudra to arise. Mahamudra has no cause. Mahamudra has no condition. Mahamudra has no method. Mahamudra has no path. Mahamudra has no result. The cause is the vast, stainless emptiness that is your mind. The condition is the mind's ability to know itself. The method is to relax free of everything. The path is to be without a path. And the result is to shine the light of your original face. remain within self-illuminating self-awareness beyond thought, resting in the inexpressible profundity of a mind set free. In this, the three kayas are naturally self-arising. Your mind and the empty experience of all that arises within the context of appearance is Dharmakaya. The mind's self-reflexive ability to know itself. The very act of perception and experience is Sambhogakaya. And the constant play of appearance, of this and that, of thoughts, of emotions, of ideas, of religion is the Nirmanakaya. Stop trying to be who you are and rest in this timeless clarity. Let go completely into the spontaneity of pure being. Let your mind rest free in a self-liberated state, untouchable and unstainable by everything that arises. This is your original face. This is your Buddha nature. This is all there ever has been. All that is the uncontrived vividness, unimpeded through the three times. All there is non-dual great bliss. So, um, you know, I don't know the kind of experiences that people had. And we can talk about it if folks want, um, or not, depending. What do people feel?
Speaking personally,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of want to continue to be an audience member enjoying the poetry arising.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's all I got.
yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, okay. So,
I think Anne may have had a
oh,
question.
I didn't see a hand. My bad. And yeah,
You're muted, Anne, and no pressure
yeah.
if you don't want to ask anything.
Sorry, I just didn't want to interrupt.
Oh no.
That was all. It was just sitting on the edge of a feeling of there being some of space, or what space might be. That was all. It was on the edge of concept, but it was like, oh, there's something here that I don't that I could have a feeling for. That was it, really.
Yeah,
But I'm not quite sure what that is.
yeah. Good. Yeah. I think I mentioned the last time I did this, my memory of other like moments of people offering me uh, pointing out instructions are very, very kind of strange and not in my body kind of thing. Like this experience of in the Ch empowerment, there's this line where with opening the sky door kind of poa practice where what Majik says, it's as if you take your mind and you just throw it, right? And then it goes wherever it goes. Um, in the lead up to today's program, I was thinking about this experience I had in one of my dark retreats where, the blah, 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 blah of thinking, was just there, really normal. Like, just, whatever. Like, just from here I am, here's my body, I'm feeling things, all the things we're always doing. Um, and then, very similar, and to what you described, was this vastness of space, this experience of Rigpa, where the smallness of the what am I gonna, and it's not even what am I gonna have for lunch. I'm gonna have for lunch whatever they bring me, like and there's very little to do. But even then, the just curiosity is of all the things happening, all this kind of stuff. The conceptual mind was so small by comparison, small and light and transparent, and in that moment, very easy to just let go of, right? Not push away, but just focus the lens a little bit into the this big spaciousness of Rigpa, and then it just kind of disappeared for a while, and there's just this resting into this open space. And this open space really is our natural state, right? This is what our Sujata Garbha, Shankar points this out time and time again, right? The recognition of the Rigpa state is really just us kind of manifesting the fullness of Sujata Garbha. And then we'll fall back into, oh my God, am I allowed to read that book? All sorts of weird things. Like, am I allowed to do this other thing? Am I authorized to rest into non-duality? when it just kind of like, it's just automatically there. And then, why I brought up, the kind of horrors of what's happening in the Middle East right now is because, when this is the mind essence of everybody there, right? Regardless of faith tradition, this big, vast, open space, right? This big Rigpa experience is the mind of all beings, right? And what is especially tragic is that contradiction, being so wrapped up in the tininess of borders, the tininess of nation states, the tininess of revenge, right? Again, on both sides, right? Trying to affect some kind of seemingly just response for a wrong that was committed, And really, when we're able to experience this vastness, then we're left with this question, what to do now? And what was your experience? Tight and restricted and one of suffering?
Could you repeat that, please?
Oh yeah. Was your experience in that moment tight and restricted and not of suffering?
It was tight and restricted, but it was kind of like there was just, it's like this. It was like there was something there that could be approached. That's how it felt.
Yeah.
But I was a bit afraid. That was it.
Yeah. And so I'm glad you brought that up. It's incredibly honest, and thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable. But this is something I've seen quite a bit, right? Where there's a tentativeness, a part of us that will sometimes want to pull back from that because it's so vast and open and free. And I'm not trying to make light of this, but this is like our Stockholm syndrome, right? Our samsara Stockholm syndrome kind of kicking in. The habituation to be like, oh yeah, like those Maras aren't that bad. They feed me regularly, at least. At least I have a little bit of shelter. But they're not 100% bad. Right? They do really work hard, those Maras. But there's some interesting kind of like, parallels around how in our conditioned state, for example, I would see this like, the New York City Department of Correction, where everybody gets very attuned, or I'm sorry, everybody gets very acculturated to a very unnatural, way of having multiple different kinds of human interaction happening. Right? And so everyone after a while is like, well, at least, when it's like, no, this is not right. So, the purpose of pointing out instructions is to help people have more of a direct experience, right? And sometimes the experience is even just seeing that there's an alternative, even though that alternative is uncomfortable, in the moment. Some people are very kind of adept at being, having the kind of requisite passivity that's needed, I think, to be able to just kind of glide right into this. And maybe part of it is, comfort in being that kind of passive, in the sense of, I'm not going to fight this, I'm just going to go with this. And so, under those circumstances, around experiencing the tightness, try to edge up to that space and just sit a little bit longer the next time, a little bit longer, and approaching, because there was really, the only thing that was happening during that experience was you opening up to the natural state, right? You opening up to the nature of your mind. And so that can always be done.
Mm.
You know.
Thank you for that. And there is another question. How is it that in religions there's this weirdness of that there are these jewels, and how come they became, it's normal to do mantra, it's normal to do this, it's normal to do this, it's normal to do this, but it isn't normal to do that. It's like it's been held by somebody somewhere else for eternity, and it's like it's not considered normal.
Mm-hmm.
All these other things are really normal. It seems to me that it must have been held back somehow, because otherwise it would have been as usual as all these other things.
You mean the instructions?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so let's put it this way. And this is actually a little bit the case, the political situation, it helps to read non-meditation texts. It helps to read history. And so within the context of early Dzogchen, for example, one of the real big initial pushbacks when it was being introduced to Tibet were from the early establishment of monastery systems. Because what ended up, we could say the implication of Mahamudra and Dzogchen is that you don't need a monastery. Right? Like you don't, you just practice with what you practice with phenomena. You don't need to be a monk. You don't need to be a nun. You don't need these institutions. Right? So I'm not saying that there was necessarily, this kind of grand conspiracy and the four major lineages got together and we're going to hold this super tight. But there is, this human element to all of this too. Right? Where in order for certain order to be maintained, well, you can't have everybody, practicing like this. So I think there's some of that. There's some people who really idealize life in Tibet, and I don't want to kind of really get involved in whether or not it was good or bad or who knows, right? But the one thing I do know is that, no place is perfect, right? And systems require, people to step into certain roles for systems to exist. So even in monasteries in contemporary settings now in India, for example, nobody wants to be the kitchen workers because they're, there's big pots of rice they make every day, and then big pots of dal, and then big pots of, and then they clean everything. A lot of these monasteries, they still don't, they still use wood. So like Gyaltsen Rinpoche's monastery, they still use wood. So they burn these, they have to gather all the wood. Then they need to light it on fire. Then they need to tend the fire, right? And then they need to boil the water. Then they need to add the rice. And these, people are standing over it, stirring. And every day, this is the work of the office, of the people in the kitchen. And that might be their role for a couple of years, right? The ones who get to be in the retreat center or doing pujas, are kind of the elite, right? So for a monastery to exist, there are even in the monastic system kind of almost a class structure that's not ideal. If everyone were to practice Mahamudra, it would be like birds flying away, and so, I think there is probably some of this. Organized religion still contains the same predilections of the conceptual mind that any other system does. Banking, right? Politics, right? Legislative, assembly structure, very, very much, Hollywood producers, right? It's basically the same thing, right? And the reason why these kinds of ways of organizing work so well for humans is because of, the conceptual mind. They don't all, though, promote freedom, getting free from conceptuality is it's uncomfortable, right? It's a little painful. And when we look, especially, if you look at some of the lives of the early Mahasiddhas, you can see how painful it was for some of them to leave, to be like, what, this has been okay, but there's more. I know there's more to this, right? And the same thing with us, like, if we're lucky in this human realm, we get a moderately comfortable life, right? This is kind of like, best case scenario. But in that moderately comfortable life, then it asks a lot for people to question the order of all of this, right? Oh, well, what do you mean? Like, whether I worked hard for it or not, right? I have this comfort. Like, why am I going to get uncomfortable? Why am I going to give it up? Why am I going to start thinking about my own death? I can start thinking about my enemy's death. Right? This is something that all humans seem to do in most. But I'm not going to think about mine, But it's interesting because I was also reading this. I was reading this song by Drikpa Kunle, who I really, really love, and who's very, very, controversial. He was this, Siddha, this from Bhutan, hence Drukpa, from Druk, the Kingdom of the Dragon, and he was. Let's pull up a picture. He is very famous for being, as a practitioner of Mahamudra. He was very unconventional and taught a lot around sex, and supposedly had a lot of famous sexual exploits, including sleeping with his own mom and stuff like this. But in any event, he's also very, very wise. And there's a song I'm going to share. I want to also just share a picture. I'm just trying to pull up now. I went to where Drukpa Kunle, one of his major sites in Bhutan called Chimilakang, where I was blessed by a big ivory penis on the head. But I'll show you a photo. These very, very intense. Okay. Apologies if this is inappropriate, but so, like, here's this big kind of wooden penis right in the middle of one of the shrines. And then, and then there are all these murals of Drukpa Kunle painted one after the other. So here you get blessed on the head with this big ivory penis, and then his bow and arrow. He was a hunter too, as opposed to going to temples and it's like, the statue or something like this. I think let's take pictures of some of the Torma. Kind of interesting. It's an old practitioner. But got, I don't know, the penis was enamoring, but all of these, yeah, even from the top view, really trying to get intimate here. And yeah, there's Dr. Nita was teaching, a little bit about, kind of related things. But anyway, so there's a song I was reading this morning called "The Song of Not All" by Drukpa Kunle, and it, what time period? I want to say uh 1400s, 1500s. So Drukpa Kunli, he was also really antimonian. So he was one of these guys who was a pain in everybody's butt, like kind of trying to really confront people who thought that they knew a lot. So he has a song. So the song of not all. I bowed joyously. Not all those who have memorized texts are called scholars. A scholar is someone who knows the figurative and the true meaning of Dharma. Not all those who know all kinds of magic are called siddhas. A siddha is someone who has realized the genuine natural state. Not all those with squinting, warm-looking eyes are called bodhisattvas. A bodhisattva is someone who totally turns away from selfishness. Not all those who sport a goatee are called tantrikas. A tantrika is someone who has realized the phenomenal world is the deity. Not all those who stay on a mountaintop strolling around are called full-time meditators. If one's environment has become the clear light, one is a full-time meditator. Not all those who behave ostensibly carefree are called realized yogis. When one can stay in the natural state without interruption, one is a realized yogi. To have a one-sided grasp of emptiness is not what is called the view. Being without limitations or falling into extremes, that is the view. To hold a good reference point as paramount is not what is called meditation. When there is no reference point and attributes are dropped, that is meditation. To pretend to be disciplined and have a double life is not what is called conduct. Conduct is to completely purify transgressions. To build a nice place of practice is not what is called the fruition. If one realizes the primordial spontaneous perfection, that is the fruition. To be satisfied with only conventional designations is not what is called a geshe. A geshe is someone who knows the inner meaning of words. To only wear saffron robes is not what is called monk. Monk means to be disciplined in body, speech, and mind. Someone who irritates spirits is not what is called a practitioner of Chi. The practitioner of Chi is someone who cuts off deluded perceptions. To give food that was obtained sinfully does not make one a sponsor. When one applies the 3 doors to virtue, one is a sponsor, 3 doors being body, speech, and mind. To reveal the mandala for the sake of profit is not what is called empowerment. Empowerment is to establish worthy disciples in maturation and liberation. To collect desirable food and drink is not what is called the sacred feast of Ganachakra. Ganachakra means to make the symbolic offerings of the warriors. To spout hundreds of words is not what is meant by explanation. If one knows the 6 extremes and the 4 styles, that is explanation. To translate colloquial language into Tibetan is not what is called a translation. If one captures the wisdom mind of the victorious ones, one is a translator. To put bits of butter onto the beer jar is not what is meant by auspicious coincidence. If all phenomena are known to be interdependent, that is auspicious coincidence. To say, may it be, or may it happen, is not what is called aspiration. When the 3 spheres are not conceptualized, that is aspiration. And so he's, he tries to kind of keep it real and tell it like it is. So this is the thing about Mahamudra. Mahamudra is beyond all, just like Hatha Yoga is beyond all. And it's hard, it's hard. It's hard in the sense, not necessarily, in one level or one way, it's hard to realize and practice. But on another level, when we're really relaxed and free and don't care, i.e. being carefree, then it clicks a little bit more easily. Right? If we can let go of religious practice, right, and kind of, maybe get that kind of inconvenient truth level understanding that the religion's not going to free us, right? The Dharma is going to free us, right? Hopefully this isn't about just curling into a nice cubby hole of ideal location, right? Oh, the religion has this great little place for me. I'm going to go climb in there and be there for the rest of this lifetime, or maybe all my lifetimes. I'm going to make this aspiration that, that's called academia, right? Academia is not going to free. I was just talking to somebody a little bit earlier who's a writer and teaches, and they were saying that all academia is a system that propagates itself and doesn't really care about any of the humans involved, right? Either the teachers or the students. And on some level, we could say the same of any kind of religion. And so it's helpful to kind of have this clear view, right? And this essential skepticism that Drikpa Kunle is really famous for, around that. There's one in his biography, Keith Dowman translated a biography, and then there's this person, I want to say Elizabeth Munson, did a more recent translation. And but in what actually it's not a translation. I think they kind of wrote it. It's interesting. I think it's Elizabeth Munson. It's based on his autobiography, but it's written to be a dramatic kind of reinterpretation. But anyway, there's this one point where he goes to see the then Karmapa, and he puts a turquoise in the hole of his penis, and somebody's like, it's his turn to go offer a kata to the Karmapa, and somebody's like, oh, what kind of offering do you have for a teacher as great as Karmapa? And he pulls his pants down and there's this turquoise hanging out of the hole of his penis, and he's like, I have this offering, does he want it? Again, making fun of this whole system of patronage and all this kind of stuff. And same thing, he did something apparently very similar to Tsongkhapa. So he was a little bit of a rebel, which I think is really healthy. But Gampopa, so there's one part of the pointing out I lifted from Gampopa, because there's this text that he wrote called The Single Sufficient Path of Mahamudra, which is very, very beautiful, and highlights the key essence of the beauty of this. Yes, this is, yeah, thank you, Eric. So this text has three parts, right? And the first is resolving the natural state. And this is what I lifted. So Mahamudra has no cause. Mahamudra has no condition. Mahamudra has no method. Mahamudra has no path. Mahamudra has no result. Right? So even just feeling into this, right, it requires us to kind of let go of our fear. Right? When we feel fear and tightness, because there's a kind of fear that exists within religious practice, right, which tends to be the fear of whether or not it's okay to be doing this, whether or not I'm authorized, whether or not I received the proper blessing, whether or not this is, in alignment with the way it's supposed to be done. right? But just by the very introduction of this, right, it has no cause, it has no condition, it has no method, it has no path, it has no result. This is the essence of it, right? This is the nature of your mind. Right? Nobody's gonna give you the path, and you have to also pay the toll, right? This is not the kind of thing where you are, this is just constantly present. It's constantly present. It was present before the Buddha. The Buddha didn't create it. It was there before Buddhism. It will be there after Buddhism. This is resolving the natural state, right? So this is what the natural state is. So we can say the natural state has no cause. The natural state has no condition. The natural state has no method. The natural state has no path. The natural state has no result. Or we could say liberated mind has no cause. Liberated mind has no condition. Liberated mind has no method. Liberated mind has no path. Liberated mind has no result. So then the second part is pointing out the nature of things. Mahamudra has no cause, yet faith and devotion are its cause. Right? But what does that mean? So that doesn't mean, we have to say, like some commercial for Bhumi Sparsha, like right now for a limited time, if you make a donation of $9.99, you'll receive all the blessings necessary to be able to realize Mahamudra, right? Or you too could purchase this great Vajra, and if you have this Vajra, then you will be able to recognize Mahamudra, right? It's not like this, right? Faith and devotion can be experienced outside of the context of religion, right? So one could go camping tonight, right? Faith and devotion. And one can go to a museum, faith and devotion. One can sit on a park bench in Chinatown in New York City and marvel at all of the busyness, all of the different people, all of the comings and goings. That can be faith and devotion. Laying in the grass, looking up at the sky, faith and devotion. Drinking something amazing, faith and devotion. Faith and devotion is not, necessarily penitence. Right? Mahamudra has no condition, yet the sublime guru is the condition. And everyone's like, oh man, I thought it was going to be easier than that. But the sublime guru, really ultimately the most sublime guru, are our senses, is our mind, is phenomena, and other beings, teachers. But they're not this is not like a Catholic thing where only cardinals can bless you and then you achieve Mahamudra. If Drukpa Kunle could realize Mahamudra, and who would really go there and be his guru, right? That wouldn't feel particularly safe. Always getting lobbed at verbal abuse, by him. Right, so what is the guru really? Unpacking this a little bit. The guru can be anything. The guru can be death. The guru can be birth. The guru can be loss. The guru can be love. The guru can be beauty. The guru can be text. The guru can be song. Everything. Mahamudra has no method, yet not fabricating is its method. This one's particularly beautiful. Not fabricating means being relaxed about everything. Not too worried, not too structured. One doesn't need to join a big group. Just rest, not in an unfabricated way. It's beautiful and simple and free, right? So for anybody who is worried about how expensive things are, Mahamudra is totally free, right? The guru is free. Unfabricated mind is free. Mahamudra has no path, yet remaining undistracted is the path. All this means is we're bringing everything onto the path. All of the ordinariness, all of the extraordinariness, and everything in between. Even the fear, the anxiety, the awkwardness, the doubt. Mahamudra has no results, yet the mind liberated within Dharmata is its fruition. Right? And the mind liberated within Dharmata is the constancy of its experience. So Gampopa then goes on to say, training in suchness on the path. This is the third part. He says, as a preliminary, practice Guru Yoga with faith, devotion, and respect 3 times during the day and 3 times at night. For the main practice, remain undistracted within the state of an uncontrived mind. As the conclusion, recognize that whatever appears is none other than your mind, and train your awareness accordingly. And so the Guru Yoga can be many things, right? It doesn't have to just be, for example, my root teacher, when she taught me this and taught me Trekcha, she did it, typically we would do this in the mornings and afternoons with a cup of tea, like a Sikkimese way of making tea. So temi tea, which is like a Darjeeling style tea, which is very light and floral, mixed with some Assam tea to make it a little darker, sugar and milk. And we would just sit with this incredible cup of tea, sip, put it down, and rest, and look out over this valley. Stop, take a sip of the tea, return. But so now, whenever I do any retreat, I always enter into retreat with a box of temi tea. Right? This is my kind of secret Guru Yoga practice. And whenever I smell the tea, I think of her. Whenever I taste the tea, it totally transports me back, to 95, 97. And that is part of a Guru Yoga practice. I always have temi tea at home. If I don't, it's a problem. So I always have it, and to rest in Mahamudra with this tea has become a ritual that is an other ritual, right? Something outside of sitting down with all these texts and blah 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 blah. To just recall the Guru through tea and rest into meditation. So it's helpful to kind of really parse things out a little bit, break it up, get it out of its rigid space. So Guru Yoga, does it have to be 6 times a day and not 5? No, the point is have some open-heartedness right throughout the day. The majority of the seated practice and moving through the world practice is practicing with an unfabricated, uncontrived mind. Uncontrived means that it can't even be contrived by the tradition itself, right? It's beyond all of that. And the conclusion, recognize that whatever appears is none other than your mind, and train your awareness accordingly. And where I think there's incredible beauty in this is, many of us will look at where we live and the time in which we live and just be like, oh my God, what kind of terrible karma do I have to be living in Brooklyn in 2023 when I could have been born in, the 8th century and be hanging out with Saraha, could have done that, but, boy, I'm a real schmuck. So I don't have anything going for me. This is terrible. I'm just waiting here, waiting, right? But then all of a sudden, according to Gampopa, this waiting, terrible feeling, right? All this, dissatisfying appearance is the nature of my mind. Right? If I want to be the same as Saraha, right, to be in union with Saraha, then that's all I need to do. Oh, this is actually just a wonderfully luminous projection that I'm not going to be stuck in. I'm not going to fall prey to all the therefores of this. This is basically like some amazing product of a spiritual cataract, just making me see and experience all this in this particular way. But it's exactly the same as 8th century India. It's the same as 7th century India, 12th century Tibet. How could it be any different? Right. So that in this way, the time is always now. So Gampopa says, relying on the sequential arising of experiences, exert yourself in meditation until mind is exhausted. Experiences can arise as either unfavorable or favorable. Unfavorable experiences arising from meditation include dullness, excitement, illness, fear, fright, doubt, and so forth. Recognize them to be fleeting experiences, and without seeking to abandon them, continue to meditate. Taking these very experiences as the object of your practice will lead you to favorable experiences. Favorable experiences include an initial state of mental stillness. This will lead to an experience of the mind's empty nature, which will bring about realization of the turning away from attachment. So whatever arises, this is where, Parampa Sangye will say, whatever arises is the treasury of bliss. So if fear arises, look right into the fear. There's another text about practicing with suffering, right? And there's this one instruction of using suffering, the experience of suffering, to remind us to not get so comfortable. This place is, again, it might be okay right now, for now, right? But soon there will be something that destabilizes this, because this is the nature of, samsara. And when that comes, let me orient to this, right, through developing relative bodhicitta to be able to bring some wisdom to that suffering. But then let me also practice ultimate bodhicitta, which is resting into the mind's essential nature while these difficult experiences of suffering are arising, to actually see that when they happen, they are illusory as well, that they self-liberate. So even my own fear of death, that's going to self-liberate too. Or my own anxiety or fears, or all we need to do is just look at them, look for them. It's as if often our eyes have this energy that can cause these things to naturally dissolve. Right? The awareness itself, these things dissolve right into. It's a rather than first see these things and experience, the fear, and then pull back. Don't pull back, just stay. You don't have to run right into it, but just stay. It's like mist. And then he says, based upon the sequential arising of experiences, exert yourself in meditation and do not be complacent. It is not enough for your mind to be still. You must meditate to see its essence. Mere recognition of the essence is not sufficient. You must continue meditating to realize it. Realization alone won't suffice. You must meditate further to reverse attachment. Simply reversing attachment is not enough. You must meditate until liberating your mind within the dharmata, both mental states and phenomena are exhausted and you awaken to Buddhahood. So it's interesting. There's this person, Ronald Davidson, who wrote, he's written a couple books, but one of them is on Vajrayana practice in Tibet. The other one is, the first one was Vajrayana practice in India, and it's like social movements. The other one was in Tibet. But he wrote about how, you know, when you look at the dates and the time, like the times around which Gampopa met Milarepa, he was only with him for a few years. I think maybe at top, at least, you know, from historical analysis, only 3 years. Right. So, why is that interesting? This is interesting because, well, you know, when you read this and you're like, he's describing how much you must practice, but, you know, it doesn't. Sometimes the idea we have of the relationship between Milarepa and Gampopa is that they were together for 12 years or something, you know, the kind of famous 12 years, or some longer period of apprenticeship. But actually, it very likely was only 3 years. Right? So 3 years of being together, receiving instruction, practicing. You know, this is a little perhaps approachable for us too. Hey, who here has been practicing for longer than 3 years? Yeah, a lot of people. You know, yes, yeah. Thank you, Larry. Yeah, it's an interesting book, that one. There's also, in the one prior to this book, there's a really great description, firsthand account of this person who was bringing a letter from what's his name? The king that invited Shantideva. I'm sorry, Atisha to come to Tibet, and king from Western Tibet. So anyway, he sent this, you know, person down to go deliver this letter, and you know, at the time it wasn't like an email, so someone just writes a response quickly. So he had to hang out for a couple of weeks, you know, to wait for Atisha's response. And so he had heard though that Naropa was close by. So he's like, oh, let me go see Naropa. And again, this is a first-hand, like, written account. He sees Naropa, and Naropa is fat. He's being carried around in this big, you know, sedan chair, wearing all white. His hair was long, and so was his beard, colored with henna. And he had rings on all of his fingers, you know, and everybody was just like, you know, adulating. And it made me think of like so many taxi drivers I've met in Delhi, you know, like bright red hair, all these rings on their fingers, you know, big belly, you know. I was like, oh, there's hope for me. Um, but you know, again, it why I love reading that is like, oh, that just like popped my idealized bubble of, like, you know, all these very svelte yogins who are all, you know, meanwhile he's just like leaning back and having a good time. again, all of these things kind of poke holes in some of the sanctimoniousness that, becomes created by religious thought. And it's helpful to, especially if we're trying to have a mind that's uncontrived, right, or unfabricated, to get out of the standard, narrative traps that keep us stuck. So anyway, was any of this helpful or okay? Yeah. All right. Yeah, does anyone have any thoughts? Okay.
Okay, I'll
Yeah.
check things I do. Um, so when I can drop into Mahamudra and in my own way, it's so liberating. And then the stickiness of the Shampa, the getting hooked, for me around injustice is really hard. And it's like this tug of war between me, like inside of me going, just drop it. And the other part that's like, no, we must find a solution to this. We must respond. And yeah, and I think I'm trying to get it right. And what suffering that brings, like just like if I could just allow myself to get it wrong, maybe. And maybe that's what I need to then be able to release it. But I wonder if you have any thoughts about that. There are these wars happening in the world, again, because we get hooked with our ideas of right and wrong. And I mean, injuries happen, right? And not everybody's available to sit down and talk it through and find understanding. And I'm feeling that from something that happened in another community space with a teacher, and no satisfaction because not able to really meet them to talk about it. And I'm just tired of it and I don't know how to drop it. Yeah, so I'm struggling, and I'm wondering if you have any thoughts how to, yeah. I get little glimpses of Mahamudra, but how to live in Mahamudra when the identity is still, like, we still need to function, right? And yeah, I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Lorena. I think one part of all of, this kind of practice, Mahamudra and Dzogchen, requires us to look at how we are patterned and conditioned, even in our justice seeking. Right? Just because we think that a particular view or response is the right one. I mean, this is the thing, right? Like, Hamas thinks their position is the right one, and the Israeli military thinks that their position is the right one. Ukraine feels like their position is the right one, and Russian leadership feels like their response is the right one. It's debatable as to whether or not our specific position is any more right than anyone else's. And this is not to say don't do anything, but it is to perhaps a way of letting ourselves reclaim some agency around the spaciousness that is inherently part of who we are, right? And when we have a real strong habit, because we're in samsara, of saying, nope, forget that spaciousness. I have a view, and this is my view, and I'm going to act on my view. I'm going to do what I know is right. And again, this isn't about stopping, this isn't about having no response. but maybe taking a step back first and pausing, resting in the silence and observing, right? And actually seeing if a response is necessary. Sometimes one is, sometimes what is it? Sometimes responses are inappropriate. Some responses. Sometimes we're powerless, like in this particular situation with the war in Israel. What can we do? You know, when we let our mind catch on fire, most of us don't have the capability to rest into resilient, spacious ease, and also love ourselves and others at the same time. You know, and I think there's a little bit in this too, right? The world can be falling apart around you, and may you be able to rest into open, spacious ease and love yourself and others in the process. You know, to do what can be done when there's stuff to be done that makes a difference, but not get sucked into the vacuum, you know. And you know, again, I don't know about other countries so much. We could look to people from other countries who are here, but in the United States, there is an overarching blind need to get up and act all the time. Right? This is what being American is, right? Is acting, being, doing, performing. And you know, Mahamudra and the Siddhas who, you know, really mastered Mahamudra were these people that were like, you know, like maybe I'm not gonna do that. You know, I don't have to. And not only do I not have to, my not doing that is not the end of the world. It might seem that way when everyone's like, come on, join, get up, you gotta have an opinion, gotta say something, gotta do something. Says who? Right? Says who? And so sometimes even examining like the basis of what we think or what we're taught or how everything is presented for us to be is really helpful. You know, I don't need to do what everyone else is doing, right? So this is a lot of different things, right? It's not that we need to do each one of these things or any of them necessarily, right? But silence is a wonderful response, you know, and silence isn't collusion. You know, people say, you know, silence is not good. In America, yeah, maybe silence is a problem for people that just blindly move into the next, you know, phase of things with rage and aggression and all this stuff, right? Those who are silent maybe have some room to be like, you know what, I don't know. Let me just sit back and rest. Let me see where this goes. You know, the speed of which our reactivity is important to look at too. You know, we will zoom right into some kind of response and not let silence and space do some of the work for us, because it will, you know. Then there's the other side of this, that I don't know that the human realm can be changed into another realm. That the human realm has all the ups and downs and the highs and the lows, and we experience them in our lives. Think of all the people in the history of our species, right, who have tried to make the world. I mean, and they consider the Middle East. I was thinking about this morning. Oh my God, millennia, people have been fighting over real estate and, you know, religious identification to this real estate. all sorts of wars, all sorts of atrocities. And even now, with all our ability to use modern technology, diplomacy, all this, even now we can't. The hate in people's hearts in the United States, like, does it mean we have to give up? No, but it is helpful perhaps to know which battles to pick are the ones that, we can actually really make a difference in, perhaps, but above all else, like, not letting ourselves burn up in the process. This is like one of the most important things. It's like letting Mahamudra be a way of tapping into resilience, like profound resilience, right? The resilience that's cognitive even. Right? Precognitive mean before even a thought response can happen. Pre-action, to rest into this open awareness before an action has to happen. Anyway, I don't know if that's helpful.
I think it's the activation of that we feel from past hurts, all the stories. And so it's just, I guess, keep sitting, keep opening to all of it. And drop.
Yeah, and letting it release. Let it release. Let it self-liberate. Like this is hard.
I think what helped me, I don't know, earlier when you were leading the meditation was like, and I've been thinking of my meditations, who is this being that's feeling pain? It's just, okay, just pain, whatever it is. It just is. And if I can drop out of identifying with it, it helps me release.
Yeah, exactly. And that release is the most important part, because going back and calling the person up who hurt us, or returning to, like, is just chasing ghosts. We're the ones who like end up holding these ghosts super tightly too, not letting them go. Like, oh, what am I, like, are we going to carry these into the bardo? I certainly hope not. And they don't deserve it. We don't deserve it. They don't deserve being held on to and given that power. We don't deserve having anything have that power over us, because it's impossible for that to actually have so I'll just address Payne's question, and then maybe we can.
That's been my question. I'm so grateful. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, saying something, there's nothing wrong with saying something, there's all sorts of, there are plenty of people, there's nothing wrong with doing anything either, right? But I think the thing is we just need to weigh out for ourselves, is what I am doing, like, what's actually happening right here, is what I'm saying. Sometimes, yeah, we need to lay it on the line, or really share with people or systems where we think, constructive change or boundaries or whatever it is, need to be established. And the irony is, say and let it release, right? If we say it and then we're attached to the argument, and move to the next room or whatever, the next phase of our life, and we're like, it's still churning and churning, right? There hasn't been a lot of benefit for ourselves, but maybe there's benefit for the other in terms of what has been said, but we always have to let it self-liberate, yeah. And I know a little bit about what you're referring to, so no attachment to results. Sometimes even the act of saying something, even though and expressing it, even though there's no palpable change, sometimes that in and of itself, is important. But yeah, it's amazing, conditioning, how conditioned we have become in every single way, in terms of how we react to things, our cultural conditioning, family conditioning, workplace conditioning, the discipline, our education, how that's conditioned us. Ultimately, Mahamudra and Dzogchen are about learning how to be able to rest into a pre-colonized space, right? Reclaim that, right? But everything colonizes us. The right colonizes us, the left colonizes us. There's no, you know what I mean? The best position is no position, right? And there's a little fear that can creep in with that too, right? Because, again, each one of us here have been hypnotized by a very binary, Abrahamic right and wrong way of doing and seeing things, and constantly judging things, and constantly. So we also need to kind of sever right at the visual level the way we project, just as much as we need to sever right at the visual level, right at the precognitive level, the way we respond, or at least be able to disrupt that,
So is it,
Uh-huh.
can I ask one last thing? Sorry. I feel like it's learning to bow to the teachings of when something strikes us as wrong, to feel that suffering and just, I don't know, do practice and prayers, whatever. But yeah, it's hard. And I mean, when we can, if somebody's being hurt in front of me, my values would be to intercede if I can. When it's myself that's felt injured, maybe it's the American dualist in me that's like, hey, ouch, not okay. And maybe my practice can be there to just hold more space for myself and the other. I'll just be like, okay, that happened.
Mm-hmm.
How can I practice with this instead of getting all self-righteous? And maybe it's not that, it's just wanting to change culture, to speak into the space and say, hey, that didn't feel okay. And not to blame or shame, but just to notice and share, which is not always welcome.
Yeah.
So just, yeah, I don't know. I have to just experiment with it.
Yeah. And I think that's, just experiment. Some would say, don't even go there in terms of parsing out the difference in things. And sometimes that's possible, sometimes that's not, and so just, I mean, again, I think you named something about wanting to get it right. And the first thing we should do is remove that, right? The predilection with trying to get it right. Because nobody's testing us. And again, since there isn't any kind of Abrahamic like hell we're going to, we can get it wrong and work to get it better next time. Like that is okay. I think, another thing worth just looking at, within the context of this, within the American milieu, is the American obsession with faith and religion. This is one of the most religion obsessed countries, in the world. And so it's not particularly surprising, although it might be surprising to us, that we have a lot of fear about getting things wrong, because there's so much of an ingrained habitual fear around being wrong, especially around with matters of spirituality and faith. We can afford to get dirty. We can afford to make mistakes. We can afford to experiment. We can afford to improvise. It doesn't have to be, first shot, only shot, right? First shot, second shot may be better. Second shot might be perfect, right? First shot might be perfect. Who knows? Who cares, right? But the tentativeness and the fear that comes into that is also worth deconstructing a little bit. Phenomena doesn't need us, right, to give it value. It automatically has it, right? And the same with other people. This is a hard American thing, or so. But I mean, all right, let me shut up in a sec. But like, especially with respect to the long-standing impact of kind of imperial colonialism and capitalism, where everything is viewed in terms of the value that it has. Right? We might not think that this creeps into our kind of pre-cognitive experience of phenomena, but it's there to some extent, and so in order to disrupt this, then we need to kind of go deep into our practice around learning how to be able to let go of projecting value onto things, right, including situations, right? And this is hard, and we don't have to get it right on the first time or the second time or the third time. Well, it does help us to begin to break up some of these things, and get out of these habits. So in any event, maybe we can pause here and dedicate the merit to everybody who has died in wars and intense acts of aggression over the past several weeks, offering any benefit from this particular session to all the Bardo beings who have been heralded into this, or hurtled into this Bardo state through senseless violence coming from both sides of this conflict in the Middle East. May all beings benefit. May all beings be able to recognize their mind as a vast, open, spacious awareness. May the bliss waves of Mahamudra touch all beings. Take care of yourselves, everybody. Be well, and I'll see you next week.